2, 1, 0. All engine running.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucer. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat.
Just before 9 o'clock this morning in New York, a passenger jet which had taken off from Boston slammed into the World Trade Center. Thick black smoke blotted out the Manhattan skyline.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucer. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat.
Just before 9 o'clock this morning in New York, a passenger jet which had taken off from Boston slammed into the World Trade Center. Thick black smoke blotted out the Manhattan skyline.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucer. The Air Force.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Esoteric Roundtable Podcast. I am your host, Justin. I should say I'm host number 1. I am one of your hosts. How about that? And I'm joined here by our other host.
Ben, what's up?
Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, we back. We took a little bit of a break, all right? So my family was sick. It started off with my kids, and then to my wife, and then to me. And then as fashioned, when you have disgusting children sneezing in your eyeballs, it went round 2 on all of us. So like 2-3 weeks of the flu tore us up, man. Wasn't really feeling the podcast. Wasn't feeling researching. Didn't want to bring you guys some bullshit. You know what I'm saying? But
and I had COVID during that time too.
Oh shit, yeah. I'm not gonna lie, man. I forgot you.
The virus. I had the virus.
Oh yeah, we better bleep that out, huh?
The virus.
Nah. But in that time, I decided to go on a little movie watching spree. And if you may tell by the background of this presentation or whatever the hell it is, I've been watching the Lord of the Rings movies. Now, Ben,
yes,
you're a big fan of these movies, aren't you?
They are. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is probably my number 1 favorite movie series of all time. I love the Lord of the Rings. I love the Hobbits too.
Yeah, I had only ever watched like the first movie, and it was like I just like not the first Hobbit, like the first actual Lord of the Rings movie, the Fellowship of the Ring. And it was super boring to me back then, as when I was a kid. And so I was like, all right, fuck that. But recently, when I went back and rewatched them, I started off with The Hobbit. And after watching those, after that, The Fellowship of the Ring was super interesting. There's a lot of...
It was actually the same way for me. Like, I watched The Fellowship of the Ring, God, probably 12, 14 years ago. And it was 3 hours, and I was struggling sleep the whole time. It was like, I'm watching this 3.5 hour long movie or something. And then years later, I decided to go back and I watched The Hobbits, which I also had tried to watch, and I found those boring for a little bit. But I was younger, it's different. So I watched all 3 of them. Was like, man, this is really good at the end of the first one. Finished the trilogy, and then went and watched Lord of the Rings again. and it was mind blowing. I was like, this is incredible. Some of the best fantasy stories of all time. And now I'm a super fan of it. And
yeah, they're super good. But me and Ben have been talking about synchronicities a lot lately. There's things that have been happening that have been like things that we were talking about on the podcast are just coming up in the news and things like that, and just coming up in our day-to-day research. And it's just been like really cool for us, just something to talk about, you know? And I went to work one day and I put in my headphones. It was super early in the morning, and I put on the audiobook for Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And I was like halfway through this, and I stopped listening to it because it's pretty heavy, man. It is a lot to just digest, and I'm gonna have to listen to it probably a billion times to understand like the first paragraph, you know. But one thing that really struck me was he started talking about like powerful and talismanic rings, dude. He just started talking about, and it was like I hadn't listened to this in forever, you know what I'm saying? It had been like a month. And as soon as I started watching the Lord of the Rings movies, I just happened to turn on this book, and he starts talking about these magical rings, dude. And I freaked out and recorded it, and I sent it to Ben, and I was like, "You have it, dude. We have to. Like, it's calling out to us, dude." And so I went from there, and I've been doing just a little bit of research on some magical ring stories throughout history, man, and throughout mythology and stuff. And what do you got, Ben? Have you ever heard of any magical rings or anything?
Not really outside of this, but I will touch on this before we move on, though, talking about the synchronization of our topics and it just resurfacing again, and like the news, the media, other podcasts.
Right.
It's too good to not bring up some of the things that have kind of surfaced since then. And I'm going to get this out of the way before we get into our meat and potatoes, which is one of the synchronizations that came to you through that audiobook with Lord of the Rings. We talked about Bohemian Grove, and then there was a UFC fighter who I forgot his name, Ryan
Garcia.
Ryan Garcia. Now, some are claiming he's on drugs or something. I don't know, but it's still wild. Ryan Garcia was stated that he was tied up in Bohemian Grove and forced to watch inappropriate acts.
Yeah, it's some gruesome things.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I was like, man, that's kind of wild story, but we just talked about Bohemian Grove and some of the weird things going on there. So that was like, whoa, man, that's kind of crazy. And then everybody probably seen it, the Cat Williams podcast with Shannon Sharp, and then that blew up. He was calling out a bunch of people in the industry of comedy and, you know, Hollywood and showbiz and stuff. And then he goes on Joe Rogan last week. And I'm listening about 30 minutes in, and then out of nowhere, Cat Williams goes, Thoth and the Emerald Tablets.
Crazy,
and I was
dude.
Immediately messaged Justin. Was like, bro, you're not going to believe what Cat's talking about on here. He's talking about Thoth.
Crazy. So you guys, if you've been listening for a while, I have a Thoth and the Emerald Tablet episode. Personally, that is my favorite episode that we've done so far. That research was like... there was just something about it, man. I just felt so drawn to it, and like it felt so involved and pulled in it. I can't, it's hard to explain. And and I feel like since then, every bit of research I do just about any topic, I always leads back to Thoth and the Emerald Tablets somehow. Like I always end up back there. So just to keep hearing that synchronicity is crazy, man. But
it's wild, man. It's like we bring it up and then it comes full circle like a few weeks later, and it's like, oh, like I thought this was like a really niche thing that we were only thinking about. Some things aren't so niche, like the Hitler episode we did with the Third Reich and them going to Argentina. That's talked about frequently. But some things is like, man, you don't hear about this every day.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And now it's just everywhere. So had to get that out of my mind because I'm still a little like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely, like, man.
As we're
super
talking
cool.
About
these synchronicities, man. And that's why I think the podcast is a really cool thing. And you know, we've had a lot of changes coming up. Our boy Jim stepped down because he had family stuff going on, and we still hate that, man. We'd love to have him here, but we want to keep trucking, man. I'm still really enjoying this. Just
absolutely,
it really feels like absolutely, dude. Hell yeah, he could come whenever. But I feel like this is a really good opportunity because it just gives us the time to think about stuff, you know what I'm saying? And it's like a better hobby than like doom scrolling or like just even trying to get this information and then like do what with it, you know, because this stuff is super interesting to learn about, but then what do you do with it, you know? But anyways, before we keep rambling on about absolutely nothing, I want to talk to you guys about some rings, you know. So I have some notes here. Manly P. Hall's Stones, Metals, and Gems portion of the Secret Teachings of All Ages. So I'm just quoting straight out of the book here because that's what I do. I'm a lazy piece of shit. What do you expect me to have my own thoughts? Come on.
That's work cited, man. You cited it.
I cited it. You all heard it. You all heard it.
Yeah.
So he says mythology abounds with accounts of magical rings and talismanic jewels. In the second book of his Republic, Plato describes a ring which when the collet was turned inward, rendered the wearer invisible. All right, I fucked that up. We're gonna ruin all of this, by the way. If you wanted somebody nice to read to you, go to the library. All right. With this, Gyges the shepherd secured for himself the throne of Lydia. Josephus also describes magical rings designed by Moses and King Solomon, and Aristotle mentions one brought love and honor to its possessor. In this chapter, dealing with the subject, Henry Cornelius Agrippa not only mentions the same rings, but states upon the authority of Philostratus Jarcus, that Apollonius of Tyana extended his life over 20 years with the aid of 7 magical rings presented to him by an East Indian prince. Each of these 7 rings was set with a gem partaking of the nature of one of the 7 ruling planets of the week. And by daily changing of these rings, Apollonius protected himself against sickness and death by the intervention of planetary influences. So that one seems more like a story, but I almost like understand that one more, you know what I'm saying? I feel like that one makes the most sense to me out of any of them. Like you're using like real astrology and things like that. What do you think about this, Ben? That's what we should say. What do you think about this, Ben?
Just give you some time to gather your thoughts. No, when you first sent me that clip of that book, I was listening to it. I was busy that day, so it took me a little while. You kept saying, "Man, listen to that clip."
Yeah, I know. So I kept messaging him, Larry.
So I finally listened to the clip, and I was like, it is crazy. Watching Lord of the Rings, Justin watched it. It got me on it. I was like, man, uncanny. At first, I was like, man, you can't not immediately correlate that to Lord of the Rings. Put a ring on, turn you invisible. So Tolkien's is a little different, but it seems like Tolkien had to have been inspired by this style of story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like he took it and morphed it into his own.
Because I mean, like you see here in Lord of the Rings, there were 20 rings of power were created. 3 for elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for the race of man, and 1 for the Dark Lord to rule them all. And it says the creation of these rings has an interesting history. Excluding the one ring, the other artifacts were forged by the elven smiths of Aragon, whatever, something Tolkien made up. Yeah. But I mean, it's still cool. So you have, the rings were forged by elven smiths. These rings from this story of Plato were, forged apparently by some Indian. Would you say Indian prince?
Oh yeah, no, that's the one from Apollonius. He had from an East Indian prince, and it was set with the stone of the planetary planet of the day, I guess, if we're talking in like Sesame Street terms. Like, what's the planet of the day?
Yeah,
that's what ring you put on.
Immediately, the first thought that come to my head listening to that though was like, man, that's the ring Frodo had, the one that renders him invisible.
It renders him invisible, yeah, and that's the one I want to read about. I have that story here as well. Yeah, and I wanted to go a little more in depth about that one. If you want me to just break into that one, because this one is a pretty crazy influence for sure. You can see it. I mean, it's the most obvious influence, So I called this one Shepherd of the Ring instead of Lord of the Ring. Because I'm super unique and smart and funny. So I also ripped this off straight from a website, believe it or not. I know. According to the tradition, Gyges was a shepherd in the service of the king of Lydia. There was a great storm, and an earthquake made an opening in the earth, and at the place where he was feeding his flock. So Gygas was a shepherd. He was in service of the king. He had all these sheep or whatever. There was a big storm, and it knocked a big hole in the ground. You know, the earthquake happened. Big crack happened in the earth, and it swallowed up some of his flock, you know. Amazed at this sight, he descended into the opening where, among other marvels, he beheld a hollow brazen horse, having doors, at which he stooped and looked in and saw a dead body of stature, as appeared to him, more than human, and having nothing on but a gold ring. This he took from the finger of the dead and reascended. So, sees a big bronze horse in this chasm. He goes in, notices that there's doors. He looks in, there's a dead body that's more than human, whatever that means. Yeah. He sees the ring on it, and he swoops it up. And he's like, all right, I'm getting the fuck out of here.
What if that means alien? You know,
I don't know what more than human means. You know, what if it's Gollum? What if it's Schmeagol?
Schmeagol, yeah.
Gollum. Yeah, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, didn't it, so you said something fell from the sky and caused a big crater?
Well, it's earthquake, just an earthquake.
Earthquake, okay, just an earthquake.
So it breaks open and there's a bronze horse down there, hollow bronze horse, which at first made me think of the bronze bull thing, but I guess the horse is different, you know?
Yeah.
Now the shepherds met together, according to custom, that they might send their monthly report about the flocks to the king. Into their assembly came he came having the ring on his finger. As he was sitting among them, he chanced to turn the collet of the ring inside his hand, when he instantly became invisible to the rest of the company, and they began to speak of him as if he were no longer present. What if they were just talking mad shit about him? They're like, God, that fucking guy, dude, he fucking hate that guy, dude. Fucking
glad he's gone.
Yeah, dude, he can't even fucking count sheep, dude. Fucking dumbass. Let's see here. He was astonished at this, and again touching the ring, he turned the collet outwards and reappeared. He made several trials of the ring, and always with the same result. When he turned the collet inwards, he became invisible. When outwards, he reappeared. Whereupon he contrived to be chosen one of the messengers who were sent to the court, where as soon as he arrived, he seduced the queen. Hey, I mean, if you got it, you know what I'm saying? He said, check this, I got the gold ring.
Hey.
And you know what I'm saying? I got some other things, check me out. With her help, conspired against the king and slew him and took the kingdom. So basically, he walked in, he was like, hey, queen, I have this ring that can turn me invisible. And she's like, kill my fucking husband. So that, don't trust a woman, That's that's the moral of the story, you know what I'm saying? The next man episode, you can give her as much gold as you want, but when the next guy shows up with gold that turns you invisible, you're fucking done for, buddy.
Done for.
Nah, but see it coming. That's from the Plato's Republic, so I didn't rip it off from a website.
From Plato's Republic?
Yeah. That's the story of Gygas.
Yeah.
I think.
I did a little research too, man, and like the first thing I looked up was like, man, has to be inspired. Lord of the Rings has to be inspired by Plato's writings that mentions this ring. So, good old trustable Wikipedia.
Absolutely.
It's like J.R.R. Tolkien was familiar with Plato's myth and had possibly read part of the story's original text in ancient Greek. Because, smart boy, he was Greek. And read it, and then the fable influenced his writing of his literary masterpiece, Lord of the Rings, which, as we know, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Hobbit came before that, and then also came Silmarillion, the book, which, if you've never tried to read the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, it's more fun to watch grass grow, because it's nothing but like character development and it's boring. And lineage and stuff, so I'm pretty sure you can...
Adam, son of Thorn, son of.
Yeah, and not only that, it's like reading Leviticus and stuff in the Bible, and the Exodus of so and so begat so and so and begat so and so.
Yeah.
But with Tolkien's thing, man, like he was such an advanced writer with his storytelling and his story development, to where it's original. His story is, but it has influence of something that's 2,000 years old or older.
Right.
Something of the writings of Plato, and he took one little small portion. Oh, a ring that makes somebody invisible. I can really go with this,
Yeah.
What kind of power could you have with a ring that could render you invisible? What kind of power could you have with these 7 rings that are mentioned, or all of these rings?
Yeah, man, and that's really, it's from Plato's Republic, and it's not like I'm like, hey guys, there was a real ring that made you invisible. It was definitely used as allegory or whatever,
Yeah.
But
then again, Plato also wrote about Atlantis. And
right.
Then we see...
yeah. And that can be confusing because a lot of people say the same thing. They say that he brought up Atlantis as another way to teach about like a perfect society and then what happens when shit goes wrong. But the problem is there is actual record, like people talking about Atlantis before Plato as well. He's not the very first. But anyways, that's it's kind of confusing because when I read this, because I was really looking for, like, when I was going into this, I was looking for real. I wanted real sources of, like, somebody tell me about some old magical rings. And I read this and I was like, well, this is definitely him, just because it really does question the quote unquote justness of man. You know what I'm saying? Because as much good as you could do with a ring that turns you invisible, how many people are going to do good things with that ring,
Now, they do call Plato's story of the Ring of Gyges. So, sorry, we're back. We had to take a small break there. My dog had gotten into this room. But, so Justin, I did do a little research on this while we were talking. And it does show that, like, Plato's writing of the Ring of Gyges. Is it Gyges?
I looked it up and there was a lot of conflict. I don't know the real way.
So it does. Some people call it Plato's allegory of the ring, and there is actually like a TED talk or a little TED education thing regarding Plato's allegory of the ring by Alex Gendler. But dude, somebody as brilliant as Tolkien, and I think he attended Oxford University or something like that in the UK. He had a very advanced education and was really good with writing. The man invented his own language to include in his fantasy novel series. He invented Elvish, could speak Elvish, could write in Elvish, and gave people the resources to where they could learn how to speak and write in Elvish, which, I mean, bro, if you've taken the time to learn the entire Elvish language,
that's like
you need a hobby.
Like Klingon and Duolingo.
Dude, learning Klingon, But it's silly, though, but I mean, it's brilliant that somebody could read something like the allegory of the ring and say, oh, this is really interesting. What a fun idea. And then go off of the entire story and say, what if they had multiple rings? What if this ring could make you invisible, but could also rule and give you power, but it also makes you lust and makes you crave the ring, and it changes who you are.
Completely, the power completely absorbs you, and that's the only thing you can. So there's also a couple other ones that are brought up. Some other magical rings. Ben, this one I honestly really figured you would know about this one.
I might.
The Seal of Solomon. We talked about it. I brought it up, and you said that you weren't super familiar with it, so I chose not to tell you more until we were recording, But the Seal of Solomon... Solomon claimed that he was given I believe it's pronounced signet. I can't really tell.
Yeah, a signet ring. A lot of the rings back in biblical time were signets so they can stamp their approval on things.
Right, exactly.
It could be used for payment. So they're saying, oh, I can stamp this for payment, like an IOU, and I'm good for it because of the house. That's exactly what I
have written next. It says, Manlin P. Hall says this about signet rings. Signet rings engraved with certain secret emblems were worn by hierophants, and it was not uncommon for a messenger to prove that he was an official representative of a prince or other dignitary by bringing with his message either an impression from his master rings or the signet him itself. Jesus Christ, I can't speak. So yeah, it's just like a stamp, you know what I'm saying? Like you could as a stamp and stuff like that.
Usually in wax seals or in ink.
So Solomon was given one by God, apparently, and it was used
Archangel
to
Michael.
By Michael. Yeah, it says here.
Archangel Michael.
And it came about through my prayer that grace was given to me from the Lord Sabaoth by Michael, his archangel. Jesus Christ. I cannot speak. I don't know what the hell is going on, bro. It is not, it's not going out the mouth too good today. Me not talk good today. We were doing our practice before we started. Me and Ben have a pretty interesting warm up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We're gonna keep that between us, huh?
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll put it on for later. If people are really interested, how the best podcasters ever, obviously. If you're worried about how we get our shit done, maybe we'll put that on the Patreon.
Yeah, join our Patreon and you can see our
join our Patreon. Routine. There's nothing on there, but give us your fucking money.
We'll add stuff on there. You want to see the behind the scenes of the Esoteric Roundtable? Shameless plug. Go to the Patreon.
Yeah.
$2 a month.
$900 a month. And then we'll put stuff on. Once we get 100 people, then we'll put stuff on there. But anyways, before we keep bullshitting on, I'm just being silly. The Seal of Solomon, I won't read through it all. You can tell my brain is just not registering all these words too good. I can't be too good. But basically, he gets this ring from Michael the Archangel. Is it Archangel or Archangel?
Archangel.
I like Archangel better. So Michael the Archangel gives him this ring, and with it, he is able to control demons. Demons, Ben. Using this ring, Solomon began to bring demons under his control, beginning with Ornias, the demon who had been tormenting the son of Solomon's master workman. By questioning the demon who he summoned, Solomon was able to learn their names, how they persecuted human beings, and how they could be countered. Additionally, the king was able to make these demons work for him. And I got that from ancientorigins.net. If you want to read up a little bit more on the Seal of Solomon, or they probably mention it in that one book called like the Bible or something.
So what I will say regarding Solomon is interesting because Solomon had this shift. He's known for building the temple.
Yeah.
He had that really elaborate temple that was destroyed.
Which is like people relate that to like the body, right? How like there was like the 5 corners and it was like all the 5 points of the body, the head, hands, and feet.
The temple, Solomon's temple, is pretty similar. It's a more extravagant. There's more items of furniture, articles of furniture, but it's really similar to the tabernacle that was built by Moses.
Moses' tabernacle, right?
Yes, it's the same thing. So in Moses' tabernacle in the Bible, this is going to be a small little portion that's not entirely related, but it is related to Solomon. In the tabernacle, you had the outer courts, and the outer courts were the brass laver and the altar, and an altar where they would sacrifice. The brazen altar is what they called it. A brazen altar and the brass laver. And then you would walk through, they had 5 pillars, and then you would walk in. To your right would be the table of showbread. To your left would be the 7 golden candlesticks that stayed burning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with used fresh pressed olive oils for burning the incense. And then right in front of that would be the table of incense. And then behind that would be a big veil. It was a veil that separated the holy place, which is what the holy place is what the first room of the tabernacle was called, that had the table of showbread, the altar of incense, and the 7 golden candlesticks. Then you had the veil. Behind the veil was called the Holy of Holies that housed the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant was in the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle.
And
Solomon's
of course,
Temple.
we know exactly what that is from the very factual
Indiana Jones
movies, where when you open it up, it rips your face off. So
or Assassin's Creed,
or Assassin's Creed, or South Park.
So anyway, yeah, or South Park. But Solomon's Temple also had an outer courts. It had, a holy place. It had the Holy of Holies. It also housed the Ark of the Covenant at one point. So both Solomon's Temple and the Tabernacle in the wilderness both housed the Ark of the Covenant at one point. That's really what it's for. It was a temple or a tabernacle,
right?
To house God's glory.
I guess what I'm saying is people have considered these things to be like I guess allegorical to the human. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And the Ark of the Covenant being the divine spark or whatever in the head of this.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah.
Now, I mean, dude, I think a lot of people think that the Ark of the Covenant has some kind of mystical power. I personally don't. There's a lot goes into it. I do believe.
So what do you think about mystical things? Because people when they talk about the spear of destiny, the spear that stabbed Jesus and struck his rib or whatever, and how the Nazis apparently were chasing it down and stuff like that because of this magical thing. Whoever knows, source trust me, bro. But
I look at the Ark of the Covenant as more like a holy relic. It's like a holy relic. But the Ark of the Covenant was used as it was built on certain dimensions, and they claim that if you touched it, you could die. But at the same time, when the high priest would go and he would sacrifice a bullock or something on the brazen altar. He'd wash. He would go to the table of showbread. He would add oil to the golden candlesticks. The incense would have incense burning. And then they would take the blood. They would collect the blood from that sacrifice from outside, and they would wash their hands clean. But he would dip his finger. This is biblical, in the Bible. It would explain this. He would dip his finger and then splash blood on every item of furniture from that sacrifice. It had to be a pure sacrifice. And then they claim that he would fling blood on the veil, and it would transport him, because that veil was so thick it had no openings. They claimed it would transport him into the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant sat. And then after so long, they claim this, in the Bible calls it Shekinah glory, would come down from heaven, which is why that big fire beam you see in Indiana Jones came down to the Ark of the Covenant. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
That's what the Bible explains as Shekinah glory, accepting. That's how you knew your sins were atoned for. So in a way, it was the receptacle of this mystical thing, your atonement of your sins, but it was the physical representation of your sins being forgiven and God's mercy, and God saying, "Hey, your sins are forgiven," and it translates to the tabernacle. But what I'm kind of going off of what I was thinking about here. But Solomon, what gets tricky about Solomon was very devout in his prayer. He was very devout, in his belief of God and everything. But Solomon also had this thing to where he was a womanizer. And it's biblically accounted for. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines at one point. Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. And that's noted in 1 Kings chapter 11. Solomon, 700 wives, 300 concubines. And it's noted that also he was marrying and sleeping with women who were worship and praise other gods. So he kind of gotten mixed into worshiping and
pagan
devoting
stuff
time
or whatever.
Huh?
Pagan stuff, or just the old,
or just gods, any old gods. So whatever gods that Greek gods, paganistic gods. He got tied up into other religions and would devote and pray to other gods and stuff. So it's hard to say that if this ring story is referring to a ring given from, but you see Archangel Michael, so it'd make you think, oh, well, the normal God. But that's what makes me think is what if this was a result of a story coming from Solomon and his devotion to other gods?
Yeah.
Or a god other than the God of the Jews or the Hebrews or, whatever else. So the Bible calls them false gods.
Yeah, man, the difference of old school worship and Old Testament worship and New Testament and shit.
It's different. I mean, it's easily explained, but that's a theology episode that we may can do one day to explain.
Yeah, that would be a touch up of our first theology episode.
Yeah, which we didn't really talk about a lot of Old Testament, New Testament things.
But anyways, magical rings and talismans. All
Well, I
right,
was going on
magical
Solomon
rings
here.
and time. No, you're good, but I was getting this back off myself.
No,
So
it's
I just
okay.
have one more story. Now, there's plenty of them out there. I just picked, some ones that I wanted to bring. I tried to bring it from a few different facets, you know what I'm saying? So this one is actually from like the Norse mythology.
North. Yeah.
My apologies. So and this one is called Anvaranat,
How you
you
spell
know?
that?
Andvaranaut.
Okay.
So this is in Norse mythology. I don't know why the fuck I keep saying North. In Norse mythology, the ring was one of the masterpieces of dwarf jewelry. There's another dwarf thing right there. The dwarf was wealthy due partly to his ring Advaranat, which allowed him to find additional sources of gold. When the Norse god Loki learned about the ring's magical powers, he stole it from the dwarf. In revenge, Andvari cursed the ring and to bring misfortune and destruction to whoever possessed it. Andvari said, the gold ring would be the death of whoever owned it, and the same applied to all the gold. It is also precisely what happened. So basically, the ring led you to gold, and Loki saw that and he's like, oh, hell yeah. So he went and stole it from Andvari. And while he was taking it, Andvari cursed it. And so not only is the person holding the ring cursed, the gold they find is cursed as well, which reminds me of the second Hobbit movie, or maybe the last Hobbit movie, how Oakenshield is super fucked up in the head because of they call it like the dragon sickness or whatever because of the gold.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like how he's walking around and it looks like a big ocean of gold under him, and you can see the dragon swimming around under it, and it's all just in his mind.
Yeah.
By the way, I got this information from ancientpages.com if you want to read up more on Varanat. But
There's also another page I just found that has a big thing now. I don't know what this website really is, but it's called the demonic paradise.fandom.com slash. It's a wiki page called the Demonic Paradise Wiki, but they have an entire page about the Andvaranat ring. And it says in here that it was actually stolen by Loki.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, I thought you said Loki, but I was reading at the same time too and read Loki.
Yeah.
But yeah, Norse,
yeah, so Loki stole it from him because he's like, oh shit, it can lead me to gold. I'm taking that shit. And he cursed it when he took it. The dwarf Andvari cursed it. So yeah, there's just a few stories. There's a lot more. I feel like I kind of tried to choose ones that reminded me of Lord of the Rings. You know what I'm saying? Because that was kind of the synchronistic thing. The Andvari one, how I was saying, it reminded me of like how Oakenshield was. What with Thorin Oakenshield or whatever, he was kind of cursed by the sickness of the gold, and of course the magical turn you invisible golden ring and blah blah blah. But
so I think the most likely explanation here is that Tolkien read not just about Plato's, ring of Gyges or whatever. He probably read throughout all sources of mythology and read and kept seeing rings and then combined. Like, what if I made a story about one, like they created 20 rings, but one ring that has all of these attributes and houses.
It's obviously it worked out to be one of the greater ideas ever because of how huge the books and movies are. But it just shows like that is incredible. And just the synchronicity of just researching things. And it also shows that not everything that hits you as a researcher. I don't consider myself like a professional researcher. I'm just more of an armchair researcher, you know what I'm saying? But it doesn't have to be so fucking serious all the time. It doesn't have to be the Nazis in Argentina. It doesn't have to be as deep as your meaning of the soul or the Thoth and the Emerald Tablets and all the shit we've done before. It could be like, oh, dude, Lord of the Rings, they're talking about turning invisible around motherfuckers and shit. There's a lot to learn about, and if you want to take some time to learn about something that's not quote unquote as serious as other topics, and so be it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, man. And I would consider both of us, man, like we've both been in college, we both have higher education, and we've done a lot of research on things, man. I would almost consider us in some ways to be like academic researchers as well as just,
right.
I almost want to say research enthusiasts, because we kind of are in a lot of ways. But man, like at the end of the day, we're just guys that enjoy cool things. We both play video games. We both love fantasy. We love reading. Yeah.
Speaking of, I was just showing Ben earlier. I was about to hop on the Lego Hobbit. Boy, I have to finish all this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I will be playing on that.
So but we're just guys.
For sure, absolutely.
Things like this, man, is just interesting, which makes me wonder, man, are there anything else? Are there other things that have like influence from really cool, like esoteric things?
That would be cool, man. If maybe we could do like a series of picking out, because I know like people look at stuff like Star Wars, and obviously Star Wars has the huge political undertones, but there are some occult undertones and stuff like that too, which I mean, I'm more interested in the occult undertones, but that's not to say that we should ignore. Either way, that's for a talk later. But I think a series of breaking down some, big
create a new
installment
like as we find something interesting about a series or a book or a movie.
Hell yeah! But
I love it,
ladies and gentlemen, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode. Ben, do you have anything else to say about magical rings, talismans, anything of the sort?
Not anything I can think of right now. But if we continue the series at some point, I can bring up some things I may think about.
Right on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you stopping by and dedicating a little bit of your day to the Esoteric Roundtable podcast. Absolutely. And we will catch you next time. And please remember to keep an open mind.
Justin, before we go, do we not have a new email address that people can reach out and contact us at?
I don't know, actually. Did we? I
thought you created a new email. I thought you set up a new Gmail account.
Is it the Esoteric Roundtable Pod?
I thought you created it.
I don't remember. I'll put it in the description. Everybody check out the description. And if you want to talk about the show, if you want to suggest something for us to look up, if you want to come on the show and talk to us about something, just hit us up in the email in the description below. And now, Ben, gosh darn it, please remember to keep an open mind. Peace out.